Joining me in the Flight 1080 studio here, we've got a special guest and a totally wild story to go into. So let's go ahead and leave no table unturned here. And with that, feel free to introduce yourself.
Hello, Josh. Thank you for having me. My name is Kulwa Apara.
And so, to start off, tell us about yourself.
Sure. I was born a twin, so I have a twin sister, and I was born in Berkeley, California. Born and raised in Berkeley, California. Between Berkeley and Oakland, I graduated from Oakland Technical High School. I went on to UC Berkeley, and I basically do community health work in the Greater Bay Area.
Copy that. So tell us, what happened on the night you attended Bone Thugs and Harmony at the Catalyst?
Yes, so I was coming out of something pretty traumatic for myself. I had recently miscarried twins, and that was like a really hard experience for me. So I spent a few months just really walking myself out of a depression and just healing. I buried my twins with the help of my family, and I just healed and took a break. And then the Bone Thugs and Harmony concert was really my first treat to myself. Like, I'm ready to go out. I invited a good friend of mine to come, but she wasn't able to come, so I ventured alone. And I grew up listening to Bone Thugs and Harmony when I was like in elementary school. I love their music. They're just amazing. And yeah, I just was really excited. And I also love Santa Cruz. So I was like, oh, this is going to just be a treat for me. It's going to be so nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, in your story you published online, you mentioned that your mother expressed concerns for you attending. Why was she concerned?
My mom, by the time we were 6 years old, my mom had to transition into becoming a single mother. And she's just very protective, even though I'm obviously a full grown adult. My mom is just very, very, like most moms, she's just concerned. And I like to do things, and I don't like, if I don't have anyone to come with me, I'm not the type who likes to wait around. I feel like a woman should feel safe. But she did tell me, you need to be careful. I don't think it's a good idea, you going to Santa Cruz by yourself. And I think just my mother, she often associates women doing things at night by themselves as potentially dangerous. And then Santa Cruz being like a city, but also kind of like rural, is kind of like, just made her feel a little uncomfortable. And, with me being a black woman too, she's just a little on edge because of everything that's been going on in our nation lately.
Right. Let's see. So, in your story published online, you mentioned your mother expressed concern, your public. Gosh, I'm losing the lines here. It's been a nonstop day.
I know. Take your time.
Here we go. All right, from the top. Your publication title includes, quote, Liberal Town of Santa Cruz, California, end quote. With what you experienced on that night of Bone Thugs and Harmony at the Catalyst, do you believe that is still the case?
That's an excellent question, Josh. Thank you for posing it. I feel like I'm very disillusioned right now with Santa Cruz. I've always loved Santa Cruz because my father used to bring us here when we were little. We would go to the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. My twin and I got into surfing when we were like in middle school, high school. So we would come here and surf Pleasures Point. So I have like a loving affinity with Santa Cruz, but I feel like, no, it's superficially liberal, because you cannot pose as liberal and attack innocent black bodies, and attack women who are innocent. That, and I'm not saying conservatives would do that. So I mean, it's not like a liberal versus a conservative thing. There are
Right.
plenty of conservatives who believe in that, you know, black lives do matter, and that all people should be respected and valued as equal. However, I do think that liberal cities and towns have this type of reputation as being peaceful and, you know, everyone's welcome. That is not necessarily authentically earned.
Right. Right. That's a great perspective. So, on that note, what is a way that I or many of us as non persons of color work to understand the struggles in which the persons of color community is burdened with?
Well, I think like right now, you, Josh, I'm not sure what you identify as, but you present as a white male, you know, maybe with some Mediterranean blood in you. I don't know. You have the curly hair, but you know, you just never know. But I would say using your platform, whatever it is that you have, even if your platform is just a kitchen table with some tea and some good food, to have conversations that can build unity um, and just put the truth out there, basically.
So, based off what you experienced in the story that you have published, what is a message you would like to bring to the nightlife scene? Be it a message for the promoters, attendees, venue staff, or all of the above?
Yes, I'm really happy that you asked that question. It's a very critical question to ask ourselves personally. Like, what do we want to bring to every experience? And especially venues that profit off of what is artistic culture. You know, the arts is, to me, very sacred. It's something that's supposed to bring unity together. And if you look at the reviews, the Google reviews for Catalyst, you see countless women of color and white women detailing horrible acts of violence by the security guards at the Catalyst. And someone even responded to my Medium article and said that the Catalyst, even back in the day in the 60s and 70s, was renowned for gay bashing and being really physically aggressive to people in the LGBTQ community. So I think that the Catalyst and all venues that, you know, host art shows, they have to look at, do we have an underlying culture of violence? Because that's not cool.
Sure thing. So, for those of you just joining us, my guest is Kulwa. She is the author of a publishing online titled VIP While Black, The True Story of a Black Woman's Assault in the Liberal Town of Santa Cruz, California. You can find it on medium.com and simply search the title or search her name, Kulwa, Kulwa. So, when discussing this interview with my colleagues, the most common question I get is this: why bring this story to the center of attention now and not sooner?
Yes, that's also a good question, because it's important that we always look at things through a critical lens. So even though this happened in 2019, it's important to point out that it happened the last week of 2019. So it was practically 2020. There was just a few, it was just right, it was basically right before New Year's. So I think that a lot of times in American culture, because we're so used to having information that's so accessible, we think that the first time we see something is the first time that it's actually been put out. And in this particular case, that's actually not true. I have been, I wrote a formal complaint to Santa Cruz Police Department because I felt the way that they handled the situation was sexist and racist. And one of the witnesses who's here with me today, she has also been doing a lot of work, and I just kind of want to defer to her for a minute so she can talk about the things that she's done.
Sure thing. So, your friend, and feel free to introduce yourself. And
Sure. Let me take my mask off for a second so I can.
No problem.
So my name is Erin Del Sol, and I do want to clarify, while I absolutely consider Kulwa a friend now, I did not know her when I went to that show. I came down from Seattle, where I live with my partner for this concert, and we witnessed this assault, and intervened, and then stayed with her throughout the process of the police coming. So I think that's an important point, because it would be easy to otherwise discredit our witness statements as just, friends of the survivor. After that, my partner and I went the next morning. We also filed citizen comments, is the process that SCPD uses. We filed those the next morning. We never got a response. So by March, I decided to start writing to the city council, to the mayor. I wrote to local newspapers, and again, didn't get a response. I tried again all of those avenues in May. So why now? Is because now is when people started listening. And unfortunately, it took Kulwa being willing to be really vulnerable about a really traumatic event in a public way that opens her up to abuse and scrutiny that I think most survivors would not be willing to do, right? So now, as soon as this went live on Monday, I started getting responses from these people that I had been emailing repeatedly over the last year. So it's kind of an arbitrary question, because it's like now is just when people became aware of it, but we've been trying all of these traditional pathways this entire time.
So trying to go the route of reporting it to those who could actually take enforcement actions before going to taking it in the traditional courts, but then after having that fail, moving to the court of public opinion to finally put some pressure on the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that I've now gotten responses from SCPD, Chief Mills, Justin Cummings, and they all confirmed that they had received all of my previous communication, and that they just got busy, so they never bothered to respond until the public pressure started.
Wow, that's quite something. So, Casey, did you have anything to add on this? As I catch him off guard.
The first that's the magic of live radio. The first time I met Busy Bone, he was walking into my nightclub, and we had a policy against sagging pants. Now, why do we have a policy against sagging pants? Because we don't check for firearms. So a lot of clubs that I work at, we use metal detectors to make sure people aren't bringing guns and knives and brass knuckles and whatnot into the venue. At the particular club that I was running the front door of in Hollywood, I never know who's who. So I specifically, as a bodyguard, I handle performance artists and VIP. What does that mean? When I'm working for Calvin Harris, I'm responsible not only for Mr. Harris, but I'm also responsible for his entourage. So the whole deal with VIP is make sure everybody has a good time. That's my job in security. The other thing about VIP and celebrity security is that you keep it quiet. We don't want running. We don't want stampedes. We don't want press. I'm constantly having to get TMZ out of my clubs because I don't want them to be interviewing. Yeah, like you don't want TMZ putting a camera in the face of a celebrity while they're intoxicated, for example, if they're your client.
Yeah.
So the first time I met Busy Bone, I've been a fan of Eazy-E since I was born, right? And then I've known like Ice Cube's family for a while. MC Ren was my first follower on Twitter. Dr. Dre doesn't like me. Eazy-E's son, Little E, doesn't like me, but I've known him a while too. And also I did the protection for Ice Cube's mom and son. His son, O'Shea Jackson Jr., was in Straight Outta Compton. I did their protection at Coachella. I worked for a guy named Mr. Hagen. He owns Coachella. So the first time me being in security that I met Busy, Busy Bone was walking in. Now, this is when that one guy was a Crazy Bone or Wishbone. One of the guys in Bone Thugs had an AK-47 in a baby carriage, and he had to do a 7-year bid in federal because that's mandatory minimum on an assault rifle in Ohio, because he did that back in Cleveland. But while that guy was in jail, Bone Thugs refused to tour because they're like a band of brothers, man. I mean, like, they wouldn't go on stage without everybody there. And so when I was first interfacing with Busy, he wasn't in great shape, you know what I mean? Like, financially, like, he hadn't been able to tour for a while. Easy had been dead for like going on 10 or 15 years. So the whole Ruthless Records empire was kind of abandoned. And when he walks into the nightclub, you got to picture the entourage. So you never know who's famous in Hollywood. Usually the person that is dressed the worst and looks the poorest is the richest, and then the people that are wearing the sparkles and the diamonds and their sunglasses inside the nightclub, they're not famous. And so I had to stop Busy. I don't know it's Busy. I mean, he's like one of my childhood heroes. And I'm like, sir, we don't allow sagging pants in the club. I said, I don't have a problem with it, because everybody that walks in the club that. I don't have a problem with it. It's not my rule. But we don't check for weapons. So if you could please pull up your pants, that would be appreciated, because I got this camera and this earpiece buzzing in my ears saying no sagging pants in the club. So Busy looks at me and, like a gentleman, just pulls up his pants, walks in the club. Now comes out my boss, Big Nate.
Uh-oh.
Now, Josh, as you and I have discussed for the better part of a year, I don't know a lot of white people. I not only don't know a lot of white people, I don't work with like hardly any white people. Like, the only person that I know that's white that I interface with on the regular is my girlfriend. You know, but prior to that, I was dating an anchor woman who was Puerto Rican, like in Puerto Rico, right? So my point is that when Big Nate comes out, Big Nate, so I'm 6'7", right? Big Nate, I'm guessing, is like 7'10", maybe. I mean, he's big enough that like he needs to go in one door in the club. And his head, I'm looking at my windshield right now. Big Nate's head is at least half the size of my windshield. And I worked with Big Nate a long time. And he comes outside and he's upset. And he says, "What did you just tell that VIP?" I said, "Well, sir, I told him exactly what's printed on our door, which says no sagging attire in the club." He says, "Don't you know who that is?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "That's Busy Bone." I'm like, "That's Busy?" I go into the nightclub. I find Busy Bone. I drag him back outside. I'm like, "Oh, man, Busy Bone." I said, "I was more worried about the dude in the sparkles wearing the sunglasses in the club. I thought that was the famous dude." So Busy and I kind of hit it off. Yeah, we did a lot of work in radio, and I met up with him at Coachella, and Bone Thugs is now managed by Steve LaBelle. Steve LaBelle was instrumental in Run DMC's launch. And my point of telling that story is I don't care who you are. If you are a celebrity, or if you are a mom who just lost her twins and you're going out to the VIP. If you are a person of color, typically you are discriminated against. Now, the firewall between that and nightclub security is, as aforementioned, I'm pretty much the only white dude. And I could care less if you're green, red, brown, purple. I just can't have sagging pants in the club because I'm not wanting for weapons. It's like an aesthetic, right? When I go to a club in Vegas, I got to go through a metal detector. Do I feel like a criminal every time? I don't like it. When you come into the club that I was working in Hollywood, you can walk right in the door. We just have certain rules. Everybody has to follow those rules or you can't come in. It doesn't matter if you're Busy Bone. And I'm really sorry to hear about our guest, about her experience, because working in nightclub security, I can tell you there are a few things. One is you should not be putting your hands on a patron in the nightclub. Mm-hmm. Your only job is to observe, report, subdue, and arrest. That's it. You shouldn't be putting your hands on people in the club. You sure shouldn't be putting fists on people in the club. Mm-hmm. Second thing is that when you're dealing with a female, you typically have a female officer who is helping out with the situation. I always have female guards on duty. Whether it's a woman's bathroom or frisking a woman or, interacting with females, you should never be violent in the club, period. And anybody who is a professional in security knows that your number one weapon is your mouth.
Oh my goodness, I can attest to that myself. But hey, we gotta get some business out of the way first and foremost. So I do appreciate that sort of perspective, and to also educate our guests on who my co-host is, and how this sort of dynamic is interesting because you, Casey, you're somebody who does work in nightclub security. I gotta get to the main question here, which is, what has been your biggest challenge of this year, Kulwa?
My biggest challenge of this year of 2021 was definitely making my story public, for sure. We're 3 months into the year, and just talking about the graphic detail of how I almost died and, almost blacking out and being choked and bashed in the head with fists and, kicked with steel-toe boots in my womb area. It was just a lot for me to be open about that. And Laura, who's a journalist and also a friend of Aaron, who's the stranger whose boyfriend saved my life, who I refer to as A in the article, she basically has been supporting me for the last year for me to write my story, and she found an amazing illustrator. I mean, I have pictures of the bruises, but I was just like, oh my God, do I really want to put pictures of my face, my real face with all the bruises? It's like, there's so much embarrassment that comes with it. Not that it should. No one should feel embarrassed for being victimized or bullied, but for whatever reason, that's a feeling that came up for me. So it was definitely really hard for me to release it.
Right, and that makes sense as to why you also went the route of getting illustrations, and just that's very smart too. Like, it's a great way to still give the story the detailed imagery, but at the same time not have to go to those parts, because I imagine trying to be that vulnerable to just lay it all on a public forum, your experience is very daunting. Like, it takes a lot of skill. Like, don't just ask the guy who gets paid to goof off behind a microphone that. Like, it took me a while to get past stage fright myself. So, in your view, how has the public reacted to your story?
I feel like overall it's been very positive. It's been really affirming and edifying. And there have been a few people who have made suggestions that, like negative suggestions, that it's hurtful for me to hear, but that's part of the risk that you have to accept when you make your story public.
Right. That makes sense. Now, the offending nightclub has released the following statement since all of this news broke out. We wish to first thank the public for their patience as we work toward a resolution regarding the altercation that occurred in December 2019 involving a patron at our venue. We absolutely do not condone or tolerate any perceived racially motivated actions or violence directed towards anyone ever, but particularly from our hospitality staff. The behavior displayed by the individuals that night was abhorrent and incongruent with the cultural values and sense of community the Catalyst strives to express through our music venue. We wish to issue a formal, heartfelt apology to Kulwa for the Catalyst's failure to live up to its own explicit policies. We further wish to acknowledge the trauma experienced by Miss Apara and are publicly offering to take responsibility for any medical bills that she so has unfortunately incurred. We are deeply, deeply sorry, Kulwa. We'll fast forward through it a bit. Actually, yeah, this is the important part. So, let me just find where we want it. We will improve our hiring practices, provide mandatory cultural sensitivity training, emphasize nonviolent de-escalation techniques, and establish ongoing dialogue with local coalitions devoted to ending any and all acts of racial discrimination or racially motivated violence. We genuinely wish to remodel the best practices and strive to be part of the solution. The 2 staff members who were involved in this incident will never again be employed by the Catalyst, and it is our sincere hope that they have, along with the Catalyst, learned from this experience. So the full The full post in its entirety, even though I read most of it, is available on the Catalyst Facebook page. So I assume you've seen the whole thing. What is your response to their response?
My response is that it's the proper thing to do. When it's the proper thing to do. So, but it is very late because the two eyewitnesses who saved my life, they have, well, one of them has been in a lot of communication with the Catalyst and also with Santa Cruz Police Department, also with Santa Cruz City Council, the mayor. I mean, so many authorities, including the Catalyst, and they never once issued an apology. They never once expressed any concern for my health, my medical well-being. You know, there's a lot of things in the article related to my health that I actually don't even go into just because I'm not ready for that yet. But I equate it to a partner who's cheating on their spouse and they just happen to get caught red-handed, and then all of a sudden they're begging their spouse to stay and, oh, don't leave me, I'm sorry, let me buy you this and that. So it's just kind of like, well, for me, true ethical behavior is when you do the right thing even when no one is looking.
That's a very fair perspective. I couldn't agree more. Santa Cruz Police Chief Andy Mills probably wouldn't comment on this matter because it's an ongoing investigation. However, during the peak of marches for the Black Lives Matter movement, he took a knee, which made a viral photo as seen across the world. Personally, I believe your story cancels out such a gesture in which he did. What say you? What are your thoughts on the matter?
I think that's a very tough question, and I think that you're a strong journalist for asking that question. Taking a knee, it is a powerful gesture in these times, and so I do think that him taking that knee symbolically, I'm not going to try to take that away from him and what that means symbolically, but I will say that it's just a performance when his actions are not backing that. Now, I know personally that the witnesses who saved my life have contacted him and the mayor and other people, and no one cared to follow up. And I would have been dead if it wasn't for saving my life. A total stranger saving my life, and the Catalyst would have had a dead black woman on their hands, and they would have made the police report totally in their favor, and they would have they were just gonna, the way that the police interacted with the security guards, you can tell they're like, they have this relationship with each other, and so there's not enough boundaries. Like, people are way too close with each other, and when you're running things, especially municipal, there should be boundaries between security guards and police officers, because you do not want to put in bias that comes naturally when you are too close, when you're too chummy with people. So I feel like he needs to dig his knee a little deeper and do some internal reflection and some self-inventory, and really reflect on, if he really believes in taking the knee, why didn't he respond to the people who reached out to him regarding the brutality and the assault that happened to me? And then the Catalyst, they call it an altercation. It was not an altercation. It was a total assault.
Now, in your view, how can we improve security in police forces across the nation?
I think doing more community policing, not policing, but police have to be more community oriented. I think police are very necessary. I'm thankful that the police exist, And I also feel that the police have to see themselves as part of the community. So, for instance, where I live, the majority of police officers do not live in Oakland. And so that creates discrepancy. I'm not sure. I imagine it would be different here in Santa Cruz, but I think, increasing diversity. I have a really good colleague who I went to UC Berkeley with who has a consulting firm called Decolonize. And she does what her whole firm is about, moving beyond diversity and inclusion. And it's about really empowering entire communities, right? And uplifting entire communities. So I think police and communities can't see themselves as separate. They have to be more integrated. And there's been a lot of pilot projects that have happened and they've been successful. So the empirical data is there. We know what works and we know what doesn't work. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to make it happen. And I really think like the way police are put on high school campuses and middle school campuses in urban settings is detrimental, and it doesn't inspire young people from marginalized communities to want to join the police force. So I think if police started to have a relationship with communities, when kids were younger, and it wasn't just like profiling kids, and it was like PAL, police, I think it's Police Athletic League, bringing things like that back and really enhancing that, it will make more people from marginalized communities want to join, and it will shift the culture.
That's a great perspective. Wow. And like, I actually wasn't expecting that sort of tie-in with stressing the importance of community and police actually interfacing with together. Now, something that brings to mind for me is the fact that it feels part of this modern day and age. We've lost connection with not only ourselves, but the people around us. And so we don't actually get a chance to know our neighbors. And I feel perhaps that's part of the reason why we don't have us looking out for each other in a community sense, and why it becomes these sorts of matches where it's he said, she said, or they just don't communicate. Communication is just dropping these days. Mm-hmm. So I've got a listener question. Somebody emailed josh@ksco.com. They said, question under the subject line, question for your current guest. Does she believe, as I do, that the city of Santa Cruz should give up the BLM sign they painted? I'm guessing that is referencing to the mural that is painted on Center Street, and wait to earn it before displaying it again?
That's a really good question. What I'll say is discourse has power. We know that a lot of hate movements, like Nazi Germany, they used a lot of propaganda, visual propaganda, to propagate hate against people of Jewish descent and etc. So I would say that when we want to do good, it's also important for us to use visual campaigns, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the sign should stay, but I totally understand what the listener is saying. Like, it should be earned. Like, we just don't want the performance, because then when we draw the curtain, what's really happening? This is not a dress rehearsal. We don't get to rerun and say, oh, you choked to death, an innocent person. And I think people are just totally fed up of innocent Black lives being taken over the most mundane things. And we have to get over this psychosis, this social psychosis of racism and sexism and ableism and classism, like all these isms that we have. It's possible to be a more peaceful culture.
Yeah. Well, hey, Casey, are you there? And did you want to...
I'm always here for you, Josh.
Alrighty, so yeah, I've got like 4 minutes until the Town Hall News alligator gets us, but I wanted to see if you had anything to bring into the table. Actually, yeah, go ahead.
There are two types of nightclub security structures in Hollywood. You have the inside, and then you have the third-party vendor. Third-party vendor security is sometimes necessary if there's a certain amount of violence in the club. Very similar to third-party valet. For example, a friend of mine parked a Lamborghini, and he scuffed the rim, and it was $40,000 to replace the rim of the Lamborghini. So sometimes you want a third-party valet to be parking your cars at the nightclub, especially like I deal with a lot of, you know, Rolls Royces, Lamborghinis, flip-top doors, that's that type of thing. So you have a third-party valet. Why don't you want third-party security? Because a lot of times you want the security to be a family with the nightclub. I don't work for chain nightclubs. I work for entrepreneurs.
Well, real quickly,
Yeah.
you mentioned chain. Well, this is actually something that is quite the ironic twist. So, in this case, behind Kulwa's story was, to the best of my knowledge and to the best of the knowledge of the fact that I used to help with organizing events there because I was a promoter in my past life. And to the best of my knowledge, Catalyst security is in-house. So
that's very common.
Yes, and so we don't have that mixed bag third party thing. It's mixed bag hiring practices that likely led to this situation. So I've got a caller who asked real quickly. Let's see if we can do this. You're welcome to stick around for this during the 6 o'clock hour if we want to keep going down the questionnaire. But if you all are busy, I totally understand. So a caller asks, what exactly happened to the moment that led to the interaction, the negative interaction between you and Catalyst Security?
So basically, I was in the VIP section, which I paid for the VIP ticket, and I had just finished videoing myself, and then I felt someone like pound on my back, and I turned around, and it was this big, tall guy, and he was like, "You don't have the right to be here. This is VIP only." And I was like, "I paid for VIP. I do have the right to be here." So basically, I went to the Catalyst to see Bone Thugs and Harmony, and I had a VIP ticket, which I paid for. And the manager even escorted me to the VIP area, and he made the comment, "Oh, I don't want them to give you a hard time, so let me escort you up there." I was like, because he gave me a stamp. I said, "I'm VIP, so what do I need to access VIP?" And he said, "Oh, here, let me give you this stamp." And I said, "Are you sure this is all I need?" And he said, "I'm absolutely sure." And I did that because I immediately, I'm a black woman, so I never want any problems, right? So he was like, "Hey, I'll escort you there just so they don't give you any problems." And I thought that was a peculiar comment, but I was like, whatever. He's being a gentleman, so that's so cool. So he escorted me up to the balcony. I had not even been, Bone Thugs had just started their set. It hadn't even been 20 minutes into the show. And I had like recorded myself because I was going to post it to IG later. And then as soon as I put my phone away, I felt someone pound me on my back. And I turned around and I was like, "What's going on?" And then the guy was like, "This is VIP only." And I was like, "I have VIP. I have a VIP ticket." And he was like, "No, you don't. You need a green wristband." And I was like, "What?" "No," I said, "the manager gave me the stamp. He said, this is all I need." He was like, "Take your ASS downstairs." And I was like, "I'm not going downstairs. I paid to be here." And he said, "If you don't move your ASS downstairs, I'm going to get someone who's going to make you move." At that point, I didn't say anything. I was just like, you know what? I'm going to enjoy my night. I'm just going to ignore this guy. He was taller than me. He looked really aggressive. But I was like, whatever. I'm not going to let him steal my joy. So I turned around and I just continued enjoying the show. And then like 5 minutes later, I feel someone pounding me on my back again. And this time I turn around and it's the same tall security guard. who was a white guy, and now he's with a woman security guard with blue hair who was a white presenting woman. And she's like, get your ASS downstairs. This is VIP only. And I said, I already told him I paid to be here. Do you want to see my ticket? They're like, we don't need to effing see anything. You need to get your ASS downstairs. And she started pushing me in my chest. And I said, get your effing hands off of me. And then she pushed me again. I said, get your effing hands off of me. And then they just started pounding me. The guy put me in a chokehold. He started choking me. And while he was choking me with one arm, he was punching me over and over in my skull and in my face. And the young woman security guard was kicking me over and over in my womb area. And she was also getting in like punches too, but she was primarily focused on kicking me. And the only thing I could do was kick back. And so I was like trying to kick, but I couldn't breathe. So my kicks were super weak. And then eventually I couldn't even kick back. And I started blacking out. And then I just thought of, I swear to God, I thought of Eric Gardner, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. It's so easy to die as a black person. And then when I thought of Eric Gardner, I just felt peace. And I was like, well, at least I'm not dying alone. Like, I just felt like his angel was looking over me, and I just felt peace. And then I heard someone yelling in the distance as I was blacking out, like, get off of her, she's a woman. And then I just felt this body come between me and the security guards, and that was Athal, Aaron's partner, and he just like wrestled these people off of me. And he, so the woman security guard wasn't able to kick me anymore, but the guy security guard still was choking me. Then finally, A was able to get the guy security guard off of me. And so I like clung onto A, and then the guy security guard just followed my face and started punching me in the face while cause my chin was like laying over A's shoulder, and he started punching me in the face. So then I had to hide my face in A's chest. And so then A kind of like had to do this like Hulk move where he like he had to get my arms off of him. He had to get the security away from him. And then he like picked me up over his shoulder and took me downstairs. And that was when I got to safe ground. And then that's when I called the police. So that's pretty much what happened. And then when the police came, they were very, very insensitive. I won't get into all of that story because I know we have limited time, but
Right.
It was horrible. They accused me of being intoxicated repeatedly. They encouraged me to not file charges. They confiscated my license. I told them I'm not drunk. I haven't drank anything. I'm Muslim. And then they kept saying, no, you're drunk and it's illegal to be publicly intoxicated. And then because A and his girlfriend were like, we're going to be witnesses and we're going to make sure you're protected the whole time. And so then A started yelling at the police officer, and he was like, why are you saying she's intoxicated with a body cam on? You're intentionally doing that to discredit her as a witness. And I mean, it was just a nightmare. And then I went to Dominican Hospital, and I had a doctor who was totally not trauma informed. And it was just like, ugh. But by the grace of God, I'm alive thanks to two bystanders who made it their choice to protect me and intervene. So there's beauty in that. And one of the bystanders is a white woman, A is a black man. And I just feel like, though I was racially profiled, and I also think it was sexism involved too, because I don't think they would have done that. Well, maybe they would have done this to a black man. There were plenty of black men on the balcony, but I was one of the only black women on there. So I think they singled me out because I'm a black woman. But the beauty is that there are beautiful people in the world. So
Absolutely. And we've definitely gotten to see, on another note, the beauty of people throughout times of tragedy, and we can apply that for many situations as well, not just yours, but with the wildfires, with the just current everything that was 2020. Like we can all agree here that was not the year of champions for sure. So hitting the phones here, we've got Kiki in Berkeley, who I believe has a question for Aaron. Welcome aboard, Kiki.
Yes. Hi, thank you. So, Aaron, my question for you is, what was going through your mind as your partner, who is a black man, jumped in? Were you concerned for his safety? And also, I want to know, what do you think separates you, from other white people in the community who don't jump in when they see this happening? And how do you think, what do you think conversation you need to have in a white community so that more white people will jump in? What was going through your head?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. There's multiple layers to that question, right? I think on some level, my partner is a black man, so I am always afraid for his safety, especially in predominantly white communities like Santa Cruz. That said, both Aftal and I are nurses. We met working in a lockdown psychiatric facility where we did not have security, so restraining people who were mentally ill and therefore committing acts of violence was part of our job. And our job forced us to cultivate these fight, flight, or freeze responses that involve fight to protect people who are being victimized, right? And witnessing this situation, there was no ambiguity whatsoever about whether this was like a mutual battery or some kind of drunken brawl going on. I had clocked Kulwa when we got there as the only black woman in that area, and so I'd kind of been eyeing her. And unfortunately, it was, in this case, a good thing. I think the reason that we were motivated to act, a lot of that has to do with our training, right? And I keep touching back to that because security guards, nurses, police officers, we all have essentially the same imperative, right? Which is to keep people safe. That's our job. So why in this situation was it only the nurses who were not at work who felt called to do that? I'm unclear on that part. I have a lot of faith in my partner because I've seen him de-escalate these situations. So while I was, as I always am, afraid for his safety, I also, I've seen him de-escalate worse. So, I mean, he was the perfect person to be there in spite of the obvious safety risks. Yeah, so I have thought a lot about your question as to how do we motivate other white folks to act. There are resources for this. If you go to the Tumblr associated with Kulwa's story, there are bystander resources. You don't, especially if you don't feel safe, you don't always have to throw your body in the mix. There are a ton of other things you can do. Everybody can participate in a different way, right? But that's honestly still something I'm grappling with, and I'm having a hard time because it's so evident that that's what needs to happen, and it just isn't happening on a regular basis. Kulwa might have more thoughts on that too.
I think that was an excellent question, and thank you, Aaron, for your response. I mean, I was just so thankful for saving my life. I didn't have the chance to feel worried about him because I was just so worried I was going to die, but I felt like it was really brave of him to do that as a black man considering our climate. But I feel like beyond race, it was just the humane thing to do, and I think we need to put the human back in human. Like, we need to put the human back in humanity, or the humanity back in human. So, but thank you for that question, Kiki.
And thank you for the call, Kiki, as well. I know you took off before then, I guess because you wanted to get the answer off air. Now, I've got somebody who is chiming in on the live stream and says that this is, what a great interview and expose. My question is, what was the indicator to Kulwa that it had to do with these attackers being racist? Did they use racial slurs? They namely ask.
They did not use racial slurs, and I think that is a good question. And it's funny because we were talking about this on the drive here, just like racism. It doesn't, I think the media tells us that racism looks a certain way, like a Southern accent and all these stereotypes, which are totally untrue. And so I want to talk about the racism that exists in communities like, Berkeley, Santa Cruz, Oakland, Los Gatos, these like sweet little towns that have these excellent reputations, but there's also this insidious undercurrent that's coexisting. And so, no, they didn't call me the N-word, they didn't call me the B-word, but it's just kind of one of those things that you just know when you know it, because you feel it. There was no reason for them to target me when both, they were saying I needed a green wristband. Well, the people who saved my life, who were also in VIP, they didn't have this green wristband, this like mysterious green wristband that they kept talking about. And so I know in my heart that if I had been a white woman, they would have been, I won't say they wouldn't have been violent, but I feel they would have been more cautious about going there so soon, so suddenly. Even the way they were using profanity with me like I was a child. I mean, you shouldn't even speak to a child that way. It was just gross and unusual.
Certainly. And so a question coming in via email to josh@ksco.com. How can we help Kulwa? Can we write to someone? Can we donate to her?
Aw, thank you. I think the best way to support me right now is to write to the mayor, the city council, the chief of police, and demand that my case be investigated, because I was denied victims of crime compensation for my medical bills because the report listed me as the suspect, even though I'm the victim and I'm the one who called the police. And so I can't help but think of countless other victims who also unfortunately have had a police report written in favor of their aggressors. Now, my aggressors were security guards, but they are in uniform, and so sometimes there's this allyship that exists between police officers and security guards that is unearned. So I would say please write and make a loud voice around that.
Absolutely. And so Judy in Aptos has the subject of reverse racism. Welcome aboard, Judy.
Hi. So I've never really seen racism. I know it exists because people talk about it all the time, and I talk to people of color that tell me horrific things that they've gone through, and I'm always just amazed. But last week I was driving my Prius, and I was getting off on an off-ramp, and a black Jaguar is tailgating me, and I'm just like, that person's in a real hurry, and there's 8 cars ahead of me. So I get to the stop, and I pull through, and this black Jaguar goes flying past me, and I'm just like not understanding, but not really paying attention. And they got stopped at the stoplight, and I pull up alongside him, and this lady is screaming at me. So I roll down my window, and she's like, "You buy a Prius to freak people out." And I'm just looking at her like, "What?" And she said, "Yeah, don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about." I go, "I have no clue." And then she said, "Effing white people," and drove off. And I have to tell you, I was flabbergasted. I would have never, ever in all my years ever thought that I would go through something like that. And so it's here, it's real, it's everywhere, it's horrible. I didn't feel threatened, but I felt really, really, really bad. And I just want, I hope that person that's driving might be listening, because that was really crazy. And I just have a lot of compassion for people who experience it on all of those levels. But it's out there. It's real. I never, ever thought I would have ran into something like that.
Wow. That's quite the story, Judy. We thank you so much for appreciating or for sharing that. And Kulwa, did you have any response?
I was just going to say thank you for sharing that, Judy. And yes, imagine it never feels good to feel like you're being accosted or verbally abused or assaulted because of your ethnicity. So I'm sorry that person said that to you. And I mean, if that's your first experience with racism, I would say consider yourself lucky. I've been called nigger, not just by, I've been called the N-word. I'm sorry, Josh.
Yeah.
By people of my own ethnicity, by white people, by people of so many ethnicities. One time I took my mom out for Mother's Day and we were holding hands in it was Walnut Creek. Ooh, fancy. And someone called us the D word. They called us, a guy in his Lexus yelled at us effing DYKES. And it was like, whoa. And I was just like, people are absurd. And we all need to just love each other.
Yes. It gives me goosebumps just talking about it. And I don't think these are good goosebumps. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Right.
like emotions and chills and So I just want you to know that there are warriors out there that we have your back, and we are so against this, and we would stand up to it. I would risk my life if I saw something like that. I wouldn't be able to hold myself back.
Oh, bless you, Judy. Thank you.
Yeah, bless you.
Thank
know
you.
that people are praying for you.
Thank you.
Aww.
We'll get this right. We have to have faith in human beings. We got to get this right.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Okay. Good night, you guys.
Ciao,
Thank you for taking my call.
Of course.
Bye.
Take care, Judy. We really appreciate your perspective and that you took the time to come forward and share that with us, because wow, it sparks a whole lot of emotion on all four fronts. And I knew this was coming, because I haven't felt this level of intense energy like since one of my prior interviews. I interviewed an up and coming Bay Area artist, Essay, a while back. In fact, that was with Casey in the hot seat, oddly enough. And we talked about a song that he wrote dedicated to the Black Lives Matter movement called Blackout. And you could just hear the pain in his voice, not only through the song itself, but when he came to talk about his stories on how he has gotten discriminated against, and even just for doing something as trivial as playing Pokemon Go, walking the streets, getting profiled. And it's just like, wow. So to close out, where do we find your work, and do you see yourself putting said work into a book one day?
Definitely. I definitely am a writer, and I definitely plan on putting that experience in my book, as well as another part of the experience that I don't go into in the article. You all can follow the article. It's on Medium, along with the beautiful graphics made by Brittany J. Walker. She's amazing. And Laura, what's our Tumblr page account? Oh, thank you. And it's called Kulwa Story on Instagram. That's the biggest place to go. Go to Kulwa Story, KULWASTORY, Kulwa Story on IG. And that way you can find access to everything.
Yes, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Kulwa, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to just come forward about such a huge story. And I hope that we have been able to not only start a conversation on this, but give people an idea about the sorts of struggles and systematic issues that are prevalent in towns such as these and perhaps across the nation as a whole. So thank you again. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you, Casey, for talking about how to professionally run a nightclub with security guards doing it in a classy way. That perspective was just awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kula. I mean, something that we started doing last year, after I worked in hip hop for about 10 years. I worked with 93.5 K-Day. In fact, I used to book I used to book Busy Bone on K-Day for interviews talking about Eazy-E and, you know, Bone Thugs getting back together. In fact, that tour that you saw those guys on, that was managed by Steve Lobel. So Bone Thugs was originally managed by Eazy-E, and then after Eazy's passing, I'm not sure who they were with in terms of a label, and then Steve Lobel picked them up after either Wishbone or Crazy Bone, whoever was in trouble, you know, got out of the joint and they went back on tour. So a couple of things. We started using body cams for everything. So all of my arrests, all of my subdues for arrest, any altercation that I have, period, I have all that on high def video. All of my nightclubs are equipped with casino cameras, so it's like 360 eye in the sky. You know, you're not going to get away with any funny business, at least in my nightclubs. And then all my guards wear body cams too, because after working in hip hop for 10 years, right before COVID hit, I segued to gay dance clubs in West Hollywood. So I typically augment the West Hollywood sheriff. And I was working for a guy named David Cooley. He owns a nightclub called the Abbey, probably the most successful nightclub I've ever seen in my life. He's had a 3-year reality TV show on about the Abbey. So my job there was to guard the go-go dancers. I had 24 go-go dancers. That's 20 male go-go dancers, 4 female. All of them are aerialists. Plus I have 3 DJs. So I have to deal predominantly, I have to worry about attacks, right? Because gay dance clubs are a high value target for more than a few different extremist groups. So
Excellent point.
yeah, I would probably never want to work in anything but hip hop and in the gay dance club community. It's just too fun. I mean, from a security standpoint, I work enough. Yeah, I mean, EDM is like all I do is like tour with deadmau5 and Calvin Harris. It's like I've seen those guys like 1,000 times. So it's fun. It's a beautiful genre of music, both hip hop, in particular gangster rap, in terms of the stories and folks coming up from nothing and becoming truly stellar human beings and using their platform and their messages to influence other artists and generations of musicians and listeners. And radio stations like 93.5 K-Day in Los Angeles, they keep those artists alive, like long after some of those artists have passed. I'm thinking of Nate Dogg and Tupac in particular. But I would like to have, yeah, so what I want to do is I want to reach out to Steve Lobel, because after Busy got back on tour again, Steve personally disconnected his cell phone. So I used to just be able to text and chit chat with Busy, and then Steve took over all the band's communications. So I'll reach out to Mr. Lobel and see if I can maybe get you on a panel with S.A. So S.A. was that up-and-coming rapper that Josh and I interviewed during the George Floyd massacre. And then we could also get Busy on that panel as well. And actually, the guy that is like my godfather of nightclub security, his name is Zoo the Great One, Z-U the Great One. He's going to be on the panel. You would be on the panel. Oh my God, Tony Film. So Josh knows Tony Film. We're working on a number of different projects together. So that would be a really nice, robust panel. And then I'm going to have 2 healthcare professionals. In fact, you had mentioned that the lady that helped save your life, that those 2 are nurses. That's a very, very important dynamic in your story, because a first responder to first responders, what does that mean? I mean, I'm in security, so the cops aren't coming until the cops come. So I got to handle it until the cops get there. I got to do the tourniquets, the wound packing, the whole 9 yards. So the psychiatric nurses being on the scene is critical, because if you think that's bad as it was for you, they probably have to deal with that daily. They're dealing with criminal insanity and just insanity by nature, where people are out of control of what they're doing with regards to their mental and physical faculties. So that's a huge component of your story, because God Almighty, I mean, you talk about, angels putting, folks in your lives for a reason. I mean, those two standing there at that time, the average typical person, and I'm just speaking from somebody who's got paperwork on, like, at my last count, it was 254 paperwork street fights that I've been in just doing nightclub security.
Holy smokes.
The average person, oh my God, yeah, dude, that's just the paperwork. The average person stares, and now the average person films.
So
you'll have a woman beat down. I'm talking about a female getting beat down, and you will have 20 men filming.
Filming.
Why are you filming? You're not doing anything. If you're holding your phone, call 911.
Thank
right?
you.
I mean, if you're holding your phone, this is not for entertainment purposes. This is not for TikTok. This is you should use your cell phone at that point to go ahead and get services there, because I know the typical response for me in the nightclubs, I don't know how it is in Santa Cruz. I can call the sheriff in West Hollywood. Been working with them for going on 15 years. I can get a unit out there within 2 to 3 minutes. Why? West Hollywood is like 8 blocks long.
Oh,
they have a huge police presence because, they're arresting Britney Spears, they're arresting Paris Hilton, they're arresting Mel Gibson, they're arresting Lindsay Lohan. I mean, those guys are on it. You know what I mean?
Oh,
so
yeah.
There's no funny business in West LAPD, because the nightclub that I met you in, Josh, is over by Pantages on the Boulevard. It's 45 minutes to get an LAPD unit.
Goodness gracious. So real quickly, Casey, what you talked about the cameras, and then I'm going to go ahead and actually do the closeout. What is the main message you have with regards, what would you say to clubs, venues, and their staff after hearing a story such as Kulwa's?
I got a buddy, one of my favorite guards in the nightclub industry, threw a chokehold half a decade ago, and he went home in the back of a police car. So I'm not sure why guards in Santa Cruz are throwing chokeholds. That's been illegal a long time. And if there was camera footage on that, you can subpoena that camera footage from the Catalyst, and you're within the statute of limitations on that if this was in 2019. So woe betide to those listening from the Catalyst. You still have a good case there. You just have to subpoena the camera footage, and that chokehold is against the law. With regards to how typically that type of stuff goes down in the nightclubs, you should have guards that are professionally trained to use their mouths to de-escalate. You speak to somebody, or you use, and what we use in the nightclubs, I mentioned before about stampedes. Stampedes kill dozens and dozens of people. It's not a small amount of people that get killed in a stampede.
Yeah.
It's like dozens or hundreds. So we have to prevent stampedes in the nightclubs if there's unbridled violence that we have to contain. So how do I stop funny business in a hurry? I show up with 10 of my whitest guards. We don't do anything. We just explain to the people that you're committing a felony, or you're committing an act of violence, or you're sexually assaulting this person, or this person's levied a complaint. These are the witnesses. We have to ask you to go home now. The whole purpose of nightclub and VIP security is that you don't cause anything but happy patrons, happy reviews in the social media. And at the end of the day, Josh, I get paid as a mercenary for nightclubs to protect their business interests. What does this mean? The young lady that is speaking on your radio show, she's not going back to the Catalyst. She's not generating any business for the Catalyst. There's not a lot of people that are going to be lining up to go to the Catalyst. I mean, if you're a young black female, I mean, that just seems to me like the public relations nightmare is just beginning. And of having elite security in the nightclubs is to take care of your VIPs and the average everyday patron. I don't care if the person's coming in for free on a pass, or if the person's coming in out of the back of a limo. It's just like how I had to tell Busybone to pull up his pants. It's just the rule of the pub. I don't care who you are. I have to enforce the rules, and I have to enforce them to the point that the audio and the video submitted in court is going to be clean.
God bless you, Casey.
Yeah, that's the thing that
So
also
professional.
just that's the thing that gets me, and why I figured this was like a perfect week, and especially now that he's my co-captain, just because it's a tale of two perspectives. Somebody who has been in the job of night club guarding and somebody who has been wronged by a nightclub guard, and just being able to compare the dynamics, see where we can all agree on strategies that can help improve those sorts of relationships between the club goers and the people who try to protect said establishments. And so thank you again, Kulwa. Thank you again, Aaron. Thank you again, Laura. I really appreciate y'all taking out the time there, and I hope that I get to see a book from you guys and like just not only to just get that story out, but just touch the lives of people and tell them, hey, when it comes to some of the worst stuff you've dealt with, you're not alone.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you both.
And hey, Josh, and Kula, I sent you photos backstage. I texted them to Josh's phone. So I got Snoop Dogg, I got Busy on the radio, I've got Busy at my nightclub. I sent somebody else too. I didn't send you the pictures of Biz Marquee, but yeah, they're all good people, man. And every one of those artists came from nothing.
Yeah, Busy Bone is a survivor of a lot of child abuse. He's amazing.
Absolutely. All righty.
Yeah,
well,
that's
thank you,
cool.
everybody. We'll be right back after these messages. Again, now I was with Kulwa and Aaron and Laura, and we all discussed the story that you can find online at medium.com.
And Kulwa Story, Kulwastory on Instagram. Kulwa Story on Instagram.
That's right. We'll be right back after this. Thanks for tuning in to Flight 1080 on AM 1080 KSCO with Josh Stevens, Casey Red Velvet Colvin, and a whole lot more. We'll be back after these messages.